Welcome to Vivid Verses. If our words resonate with you, please subscribe, tap the like, and share your thoughts and your feelings in the comments. Now let's begin. There is a specific hollowed-out kind of exhaustion that comes from being understanding. It isn't the physical fatigue of a double shift or the mental strain of closing a high-stakes merger. It is a spiritual erosion, like water dripping incessantly onto a stone until the stone is no longer a rock, but a concave memory of what it used to be. For 3 years, I had been the patron saint of patience. I was the husband who nodded sympathetically when Dr. Sterling, a man with a beard too perfectly groomed to be trusted, brought up somatic stress responses and sympathetic nervous system overload. I was the man who slept on the absolute edge of our California King mattress, training my body to remain rigid even in sleep, careful not to let my leg brush against hers, lest I trigger the anxiety that apparently manifested exclusively as a violent repulsion to intimacy with me. We didn't call it a dead bedroom. That was too crude, too plebeian. We called it the dry season at first. Then, as the months turned into years, it became simply the condition. My wife, Vivian, treated it like a terminal illness that required endless accommodation and capital investment. I paid for the therapy sessions at $400 an hour, 3 times a week. I paid for the acupuncture, the somatic healing workshops, the weekend retreats to Sedona to realign her chakras, and the separate vacations she claimed she needed to miss me again. I was a venture capitalist by trade. My entire career was built on pattern recognition, analyzing risk, and calling out bullshit in boardrooms filled with sharks. I could look at a CEO's projections and tell you within a margin of error of 2% where the company would be in 5 years. Yet in my own home, I had been staring at a collapsing graph and telling myself it was just a market correction. I was putting equity into a sinking ship because I had convinced myself the hull was sound. That Tuesday started like any other, which is to say, it started with a lie I told myself. Maybe today will be different. I had come home early from a negotiation regarding a biotech acquisition. The deal had gone surprisingly smooth. The founders were desperate, and I was in a mood to acquire. I drove home feeling a rare lightness in my chest. I parked my Audi A8 down the street. The neighbor's contractor was blocking our driveway with a dumpster again, and walked up to the house. The manicured hedges of our cul-de-sac seemed to mock me with their perfection. Everything looked right on the outside. I didn't announce myself. It wasn't a tactical decision. I just didn't have the energy to perform the honey, I'm home ritual for an audience of one who likely wouldn't look up from her phone or, worse, would offer me that tight, pained smile that said, "I am tolerating your presence." The French doors leading to the rear patio were open. The late afternoon sun was hitting the limestone pavers, and the air smelled of jasmine, expensive sunscreen, and buttery Chardonnay. Vivian wasn't alone. I recognized the voices immediately, Chloe and Renee. The inner circle. I privately referred to them as the coven of the cul-de-sac. They were women who treated marriage like a hostage situation and credit limits like a dare. I stepped into the kitchen, dropping my briefcase on the Persian runner to mute the sound. I reached for the handle of the Sub-Zero fridge to get a sparkling water, but my hand froze on the cold steel when I heard my name. Arthur? Oh God, no. He treats me like I'm made of spun glass, Vivian said. Her voice didn't have that thin, fragile timbre she used with me. The voice of the invalid, the sufferer. It was rich, throaty, and currently thick with amusement. It was the voice of the woman I married 5 years ago, before the conditions set in. But 3 years, Viv? That was Chloe. I'd have climbed the walls. Or the pool boy. Who says I haven't climbed the walls? Vivian laughed. It was a wicked, vibrant sound I hadn't heard directed at me since the Obama administration. Just not with him. I stood there in the shadows of my chef's kitchen, A kitchen I paid for, designed for her culinary hobbies she never pursued, and felt the blood drain out of my face. It wasn't a rush of heat. It was a sudden, absolute zero. The temperature in the room didn't drop, but I did. "But doesn't he ask?" Renee asked, the clink of ice against glass punctuating her question. "I mean, he's a guy. He keeps himself in shape. He's got to be dying." "Oh, he asks," Vivian said, the sound of liquid pouring into a glass filling the silence in the kitchen. But I just hit him with the pressure speech. I tell him that when he asks, it makes me feel obligated, which kills the mood and triggers my panic response. I tell him his desire is actually what's suppressing mine. It's perfect circular logic. He buys it every time. He's so noble about it. It's pathetic, pathetic. The word hung in the air, suspended in the dust motes dancing in the sunlight shafts. It settled on my shoulders like a lead vest. "You're terrible," Chloe giggled, though there was admiration in her tone. "So who is it this month? Still the tennis pro? Marco?" "No, too clingy," Vivian scoffed. He started talking about feelings. "I'm seeing an architect downtown now. High stamina, low conversation. Exactly how I like it. Honestly, ladies, my drive is fine. It's higher than it was in my 20s. I just need variety. And Arthur is just so vanilla. He's safe. He's the wallet and the safety net. You don't sleep with the safety net. You land on it when you fall." I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I didn't grab the Ming vase on the foyer table and hurl it through the glass. In business, when you realize a deal is bad, fundamentally, structurally rotten, you don't throw a tantrum. You don't try to negotiate with a burning building. You liquidate. You cut your losses. You exit before the market closes. A cold, mechanical clarity washed over me. It was the same hyper-focused dissociation I felt right before I gutted a failing startup. The emotional attachment was severed, cauterized instantly by the sheer magnitude of the disrespect. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was the mockery. She wasn't just hurting me. She was laughing at the fact that I refused to hurt her. She thought I was gullible. She thought I was safe. I looked at my Patek Philippe. 4:15 p.m. Banks closed at 5 o'clock, but I had premium private client access. I moved silently through the kitchen, bypassing the living room and heading straight for the study. My loafers on the hardwood were the only sound, but their laughter outside was loud enough to mask a marching band. I sat at my mahogany desk and woke my laptop. The fan whirred to life. Step 1, the assets. We had a joint savings account, substantial but not my primary holding. However, it was the liquidity she relied on for her lifestyle maintenance, the fund that paid for the lunches, the personal trainers, and, apparently, the hotels for the architect. I transferred my contribution, roughly 85% of the total, into my private holding company's account. I left her exactly what she had contributed over the last 3 years, which, according to the ledger, amounted to a few birthday checks from her grandmother and a tax refund from before she stopped working. Step 2, the logistics. I opened the wall safe behind the false panel and the bookshelf. I took my passport, my birth certificate, the deed to the lake house, sole ownership, premarital asset. Thank God for ironclad prenups she never bothered to read thoroughly because she was too busy picking out flower arrangements for the wedding. I took the spare key to my safety deposit box. Step 3, the paperwork. I'm a man who prepares for contingencies. I deal in risk management. I had divorce papers drafted 6 months ago, not because I intended to use them, but because I was beginning to suspect a medical issue wasn't the root cause. I had kept them as a dark, what if, a nuclear option I prayed I'd never have to authorize. I pulled the file from the bottom of the stack. I flipped to the last page. The scrawl of my signature felt like slashing a sword through a heavy velvet curtain. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the sanctuary of her anxiety. The The room where I'd spent 1,000 nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. I bypassed the large suitcases, too noisy to wheel down the hall. I grabbed my distressed leather weekender bag. I packed with military efficiency. 3 bespoke suits, casual wear, toiletries, my watch roll. I took nothing that wasn't strictly mine. I didn't want the memories. I didn't want the stuff. I left the framed photo of us from our honeymoon on the nightstand. I checked the drawers. Her jewelry box was open. I saw the diamond tennis bracelet I gave her for our anniversary last month, a reward for her trying so hard in therapy. It sat there, glittering in the ambient light. I left it. It was a sunk cost. To take it would be to acknowledge it still had value. I carried the bag downstairs. The laughter outside had died down to a low murmur of gossip. They were probably dissecting Renee's marriage now, or Chloe's recent facelift, which she claimed was just good hydration. I walked into the kitchen. I placed the signed divorce papers on the center of the granite island, right next to the bowl of organic lemons she bought for the aesthetic but never used. I took a fountain pen from my pocket, a Mont Blanc she had given me, ironically, for my birthday. On the sticky notepad she used for grocery lists, I wrote, "You thought I was easy to fool, but you'll find I'm even easier to lose." I stuck it to the front of the legal folder. Then I did something petty. I admit it. It wasn't a high road, but the high road has a terrible view and no air conditioning. I took the keys to her Range Rover, the one leased in my name, off the hook. I also took the credit cards that were supplementary to my primary account, the black card she used to signal status to the coven. I walked out the front door, locking it behind me. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot. I threw my bag into the passenger seat of my Audi. I keyed the ignition. The W12 engine purred, a sound of pure, unadulterated engineering perfection. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the patio gate open. Vivian walked out, holding a wine glass, looking towards the front of the house, probably wondering why the Range Rover chirped when I locked it remotely from my pocket. She saw my car. She saw me. I didn't wave. I didn't flip her off. I didn't grimace. I just put the car in drive and accelerated. My phone buzzed against the center console before I even hit the stop sign at the end of the street. Caller ID, Vivian wife. I let it ring. It buzzed again and again. By the time I merged onto the highway, heading toward the city and the hotel where I'd spend the next week, the missed calls were in the double digits. Then came the texts. "Where are you going? Why did you take the Rover keys? I need to go to yoga." Arthur, pick up. You're scaring me." I wasn't scaring her. I was inconveniencing her. There is a massive difference, though she likely lacked the emotional depth to distinguish between the two. She wasn't afraid for my safety. She was afraid for her solvent status. I pressed the button on the steering wheel to activate voice command. "Call Attorney Harris," I said. The line rang twice. "Arthur?" Harris sounded surprised. He was usually leaving the office by now. "It's late. Everything okay?" "I'm triggering the clause, Harris," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor I expected to feel. "File the papers tomorrow morning. Serve her at the house. And freeze the secondary accounts immediately." There was a pause on the other end. Harris was a shark, a man who ate empathy for breakfast, but he was a shark who liked me. "You sure? There's no coming back from that move. That's the scorched earth protocol." I looked at the road stretching out ahead of me. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the asphalt. For the first time in 3 years, the pressure in my chest was gone. The somatic stress had vanished, only it turns out it wasn't hers. It was mine. "I know," I said. "That's the point. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons is a sterile kind of luxury. It has everything you need and nothing you want. It smells of lavender, polished mahogany, and neutrality." I had been there for 3 days. I hadn't answered a single call from Vivian. The count was now up to 47 calls and over 100 texts. The texts had evolved from confusion to anger, then to panic, and finally to a cloying, desperate attempt at affection. "Baby, please. Let's talk. I saw the papers. This is insane. We can fix this. I made you dinner. Please come home. I'm sorry if I did something. Just tell me what I did." I deleted them without replying. The silence was my weapon, and I was wielding it with surgical precision. I was sitting on the balcony, overlooking the city grid, drinking a scotch that cost more than my first car. The wind was whipping around the high-rise, but I felt warm. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Vivian. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. "This is Arthur." "Arthur? It's Chloe." I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. "Of course. The flying monkey." "Hello, Chloe." Look, I don't know what's going on," she started, her voice pitched high, feigning the role of the concerned peacemaker. "Vivian is a wreck. She's at my place. She can't get into the house because you changed the security codes remotely." "Is that true?" "Smart house," I said dryly. "Smarter than the occupants, usually." "Arthur, this is cruel," Chloe snapped, dropping the pretense. "She has nothing right now. Her cards are declined. She tried to buy gas, and it was humiliating. She's crying her eyes out. You can't just abandon her, because, well, why? She said you just left a note." "What did she do?" I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who held the detonator. "Put her on speaker, Chloe. I know she's right next to you. I can hear her breathing." A pause, then a rustling sound. "Arthur." Vivian's voice was wet, ragged. It was a masterful performance piece. "Arthur, please. What is happening? Why are you doing this?" "I came home, and you were gone, and the money." "Arthur, I can't access the accounts." "I was on the patio, Vivian," I said softly. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. "I came home early on Tuesday." I continued, my voice conversational, as if discussing the weather or the NASDAQ. I walked into the kitchen. The door was open. I heard everything. The pressure speech. The architect. The fact that I'm vanilla. The safety net. I took a sip of scotch, letting the burn settle in my chest. "I heard you laughing at me. I heard you call me pathetic." "Arthur, wait," she stammered, the panic real this time. That was just talk. It was just girl talk. It didn't mean anything. I was trying to fit in with them. You know how they are. I was showing off. "I know exactly how they are," I said. "And I know exactly who you are. That's the problem. You see, I thought I was married to a woman who was struggling with a complex psychological block. I respected that. I honored that. But it turns out I was married to a con artist." "It was a lie," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I made it up. There is no architect. I just wanted to sound cool in front of Chloe and Renee." "It doesn't matter, Viv," I said, my voice hardening. "Because here is the reality. Either you are cheating on me, in which case we're done, or you have been psychologically tormenting me for 3 years, making me feel like a predator in my own marriage, faking a medical condition, and draining our finances for therapy to fix a lie, all while mocking my loyalty to my face. In which case, we are also done." "I love you," she wailed. "No," I corrected her. "You love the lifestyle. You love the credit limit. You love the fact that I fix everything. But I have some bad news, Vivian. I don't fix things anymore. I liquidate them. I will ruin you," she hissed, her voice dropping, the monster finally peeking out from behind a mask. The transformation was instant. "I will take half of everything. The prenup won't hold if I claim emotional abuse, abandonment, financial coercion." "Good luck with that," I said. "I have receipts, Viv. Literally. 3 years of therapy bills for a condition you bragged about faking in front of 2 witnesses. I have the timestamps. I have the dates." I paused for effect. And regarding the architect, I had my private investigator run a check yesterday. Funny thing about girl talk, Viv. Usually, people don't rent a studio apartment on 4th Street for girl talk, or charge room service to the joint account under consulting fees. I have the photos. I have the chat logs. You spied on me? I performed due diligence. I corrected. I suspected for a long time. I just didn't want to believe it. Tuesday was just the confirmation. And if you try to drag this out, if you try to make this a war, I will subpoena Marco the tennis pro and your architect friend. I'm sure their wives or girlfriends will be very interested in the deposition. I'll make the divorce public record. Everyone in the club will know. You wouldn't. I'm the guy who waited 3 years for a touch you gave away for free to strangers, I said. You have no idea what I'm capable of when I stop waiting. Speak to Harris. Do not call me again. I hung up. I blocked Chloe's number. I stared out at the city skyline. It was dark, a tapestry of electric light. The city was moving, grinding, living. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't regret. It was hunger. I realized I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. I picked up the hotel phone. Room service, the operator said brightly. I like the ribeye, I said. Rare, and a bottle of the '08 Cabernet. Right away, sir. I opened my laptop. I had a business to run. I had emails to answer. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't clouded by the fog of rejection or the puzzle of a broken marriage. Vivian was right about one thing. I was easy to lose. She just never bothered to check if I was worth keeping until I was already gone. And by then, the price of admission had gone up, and she was bankrupt. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in forensic dismantling. Harris, true to his reputation, was a butcher with a law degree. We met in his office, a glass-walled enclosure that overlooked the bay, the water churning gray and restless below. She's contesting the initial offer, Harris said, sliding a thick binder across the mahogany table. She wants the house. She wants alimony for lifestyle maintenance. She's claiming she gave up her prime years to support your career. I laughed, a dry, barking sound. She hasn't worked since the day we got engaged. Her primary contribution to my career was spending the bonuses before they cleared. We know that, Harris said, tapping a pen against the binder. But the courts can be unpredictable. However, we have leverage. The PI report on the architect, guy's name is Marcus, by the way, is solid. But here's the kicker. Marcus is married to the daughter of a city councilman. I raised an eyebrow. That's convenient. It's nuclear, Harris corrected. If we depose him, his life is over. His father-in-law funds his firm. Vivian knows this. Marcus has likely been blowing up her phone, begging her to settle quietly, so his name stays out of it. So she's isolated. I'm used. The coven will turn on her the moment the social stigma hits. Chloe and Renee won't want to be associated with a public scandal. They thrive on gossip, but they fear contagion. Exactly. We press, Harris said. We offer her a lump sum, enough to start over, but nowhere near enough to maintain the delusion of her current life. We keep the house. We keep the investments. She walks away with the car, once she refinances it in her name, and a check. Do it, I said. The meeting with Vivian, when it finally happened, was in a mediation room 3 weeks later. She looked different. The gloss was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a modest black dress I had never seen before, probably bought for the occasion to play the grieving widow of a living marriage. She wouldn't look at me. She sat across the table, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he chased ambulances for exercise. My client is distressed, her lawyer began, blustering. She was blindsided, thrown out of her home. Harris cut him off with a raised hand. Your client was engaged in a multi-year fraud regarding her health to mask infidelity. We are not here to debate feelings. We are here to mitigate damage. Specifically, The damage to your client's reputation should the subpoena list become public. Harris slid a single piece of paper across the table. Vivian looked at it. Her eyes widened. It was the settlement offer. It was fair, objectively speaking. But for her, it was poverty. "I can't live on this," she whispered, finally looking at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Arthur, the mortgage on a condo alone." "Get a job, Vivian," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of malice. "You have a degree in art history you never used. You're young. You're capable. The free ride is over." "How can you be so cold?" she asked, a tear slipping down her cheek. "After everything? Cold." I leaned forward. "Vivian, I spent 3 years setting myself on fire to keep you warm. I'm not cold. I'm just all burned out." She stared at me, searching for the man who used to apologize for breathing too loud. She was looking for the safety net, but the net was gone. She signed. The moment the ink dried, I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. Walking out of that building, the air hit me differently. It was crisp, smelling of rain and exhaust and possibility. I walked to my car, got in, and for a moment I just sat there. I looked at the empty passenger seat. For years, that empty space had felt like an accusation. Now it felt like room. Room for my gym bag. Room for a chaotic stack of files. Room for someone else, eventually. Someone who wouldn't require a down payment of my dignity to be with me. I started the car. I had a meeting at 2 o'clock. A new startup, renewable energy. High risk, high reward. I pulled into traffic, merging seamlessly into the flow. The rearview mirror showed the mediation center shrinking behind me, getting smaller and smaller until it was just another gray building in a gray city. I turned on the radio. Music filled the cabin. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, driving toward the future, finally, in the driver's seat of my own life. Thank you for listening. That brings today's story to a close. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. See you next time.